Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of In-Depth School and Community, a topical show that features issues confronting our schools today here in the Concord School District and the community in general. And I know one thing the community's been somewhat concerned about is this whole issue of competency-based grading. You know, why are we going in that direction? It seems like we've been doing this for about 3 years now or so. And I know that the elementary schools have moved pretty much into that philosophy, and now I understand it's also taking place at the high school. And at some point down the road, I know the high school is looking to perhaps switch the competency grades over to an actual 1 to 4 system as opposed to the current numerical system of 0 to 100. But that's down the road. Let's talk about what we have in front of us right now. What is this whole thing called competency-based grading, and why are we doing it? My distinguished panel has done this for quite some time. They were in a program at Southern New Hampshire University where they actually did a couple of presentations on this and, you know, why they're excited about this shift in terms of how we look at grading students' work. And perhaps Mike Reardon, who is our interim principal, said it best, it's not about the grading, it's about the learning. And so that's really what we want to concentrate on. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about who our guests are. I'm pleased to have back with us again, by popular demand, Miss Katherine McDonough.
Hello.
Next to him is Graeme Crowther.
How you doing?
And next to him is Gabe Cohen, our distinguished music educator. So, Katie, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Talk to us about your experience in competency-based grading and why you think it's such a valuable direction or move that we should be making.
Sure. I think for me, I came from a very traditional educational background,
Right.
ABCD, private
Right.
school, that whole thing. I think as an educator, reading and learning more about competency-based education, the big takeaway is that it makes learning the variable as opposed to having time be the variable. So it's not about where did you get at the end of a quarter. It's about when have you mastered these skills. And so I think
So here's where it gets interesting because parents tell me this all the time. So that's all well and good.
Okay, great.
But so we got Graeme over here, right? Graham's a little bit slow. It's taking him a little bit of time
Sure.
to catch up with what we need to do. You're going to give him all these chances to sort of recoup and understand what he needs to do to be better at whatever that particular skill is. I'm with you so far. That's great. However, what about the rest of the class? What's going to happen to them while you're playing around with Graeme?
Well, I think that's the time when educators can offer enrichment opportunities, which especially I think in music and I teach Latin, a world language, there's so many, you hear teachers all the time say, oh, I didn't get to this or that, and that's the time when you can do those sort of reach goals or stretch things that you wouldn't normally get to do. So those students have an opportunity to go even further than they may have.
I see. Graeme?
For me, particularly, I think the traditional way is a very linear system. They come in September of their freshman year, they cross that stage in May of their senior year, and everybody is expected to do the same. But not every individual learns the same. And with competency-based grading, we have a chance to address those learner within a time period and with more specific actions than we have traditionally. I mean, technology has evolved, learning has evolved, teaching has evolved, but the grading system hasn't evolved. And so it's time that we catch up as educators to what's out there and what's available to make sure that the students have mastered the topics rather than say at this certain point in time, this is where you are, we're done, we're moving on.
Right, so let's just pick up on that point. That's an important point. So what you're saying is, let's say Gabe's in your class. Now he hasn't mastered whatever that topic is, quadratic equations or whatever it is you teach, right? And let's assume that be the case. So you say, well, Gabe, I'm sorry. Right now I gave you a quiz or a test or whatever, and you got a C- on that. So that grade goes down, and that's where you are at that point in time. You now move on to the next topic. So he never gets to a point where he's actually mastered that or understood it. Now in mathematics, I'm presuming you're building on a foundation. So his weakness is only going to follow him. It's not like he's changing from one book to a new book, right?
Yep, and those weaknesses could have occurred back in 4th or 5th grade with fractions, something like that. We see that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's never addressed.
Just moves up every year.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the high school, Algebra 1 to Geometry to Algebra 2, math is so sequential that we're leaving kids behind. We're not setting them up for success at that next level for that next course.
So you'd be willing to slow the whole class down if need be to make sure everyone gets to a point where they truly understand what we're doing here.
Absolutely.
So it's not about, for you, it's not about, well, my curriculum says that by May or June I need to be at, this point.
Yep.
One of my favorite stories is the social studies teacher who says, if I don't get to the Civil War by Christmas vacation, I'm in trouble. So, I mean, it's not about that linear progression, as you've said, or a chronology, and I have to reach a certain point. It's about the learning, and it's about being able to take that learning and apply it in novel situations.
Exactly.
That's really what you're after.
Yep.
Gabe?
I really like the competency-based grading system, mostly because I find one of the problems with the old system that I found is that grades end up being a competition amongst each other.
Excellent point.
As opposed to like a competition with themselves of how they can learn more and get better at whatever topic they are. I just find having 100 points to play with is it's really difficult. And how do you differentiate between a 96 and a 97 or an 82 and an 83? And just being able to grade on if a student understands at the 3 and has gone above and beyond and can now get the 4, it's gonna show kids learning better than in a 100-point scale.
So are you suggesting, let's assume that Katie and I are clarinet players in the band. So you're not going to compare me against her. You're not going to say you need to be able to play like she does. You're more interested in allowing me to play as best as I can.
I'm shooting for that learning goal. Like,
Yep.
can you personally play whatever scale that you can? So if we're learning on a B-flat concert scale,
Right.
can you play that scale to the best of your ability?
Gotcha.
And you're trying to reach where you're at and then
Right.
improve your own ability.
Right. And in a well, how shall I say, a content-based class like, math, science, English, social studies, and I'm looking at you, Katie, so I write a paper, right?
Sure.
So you grade the paper and you say, well, right now, if I were to grade the paper, I see it as a 2 or a 3 or what have you. Maybe it's in between, right?
Right.
And so you give it back to me and you say, look, you can improve upon this. Here are some suggestions I might, offer you so that you might get be a little bit better equipped in terms of how to present your argument. So I might do 1, 2, or 3 iterations of that paper until I'm satisfied. Now, someone like Graeme might say, hey, I got a 3, I'm all set, see you later.
Right.
Whereas Gabe, he's very conscientious. He wants to make sure he gets that 4, so he'll be sending you more and more iterations. Do I have that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's my favorite thing, especially as a language teacher.
Right.
I mean, I think it applies to all disciplines, but the fact that it gives kids the chance to go above and beyond and be recognized for that, regardless of time. Maybe it takes them 2 weeks to edit the paper to get the 4, but they did it. They took the time. And so I really like that, especially as you're trying to build skills in a sequential pattern.
Right, and again, it's about the learning. What has the child been able to master in terms of that unit of learning, whatever it happens to be?
Right.
How can he or she present their learning in a meaningful manner? How can they attribute the learning into some sort of novel situation where they have to apply it? It's different now. I mean, those are all considerations that you're after, and so we seem to be talking about moving away from the traditional paper and pencil test that kind of gives a finite timeline. At this point in time, you got a 92 or a 94 or an 86, right?
Right.
And now it's more about, I'm more concerned about the continuum of the learning as opposed to a finite point in time where I give you a, quote, score without allowing you the opportunity to redress whatever that issue happens to be. I mean, this is your point, Gabe, Graeme, being able to allow that student to keep going after that particular skill until such time that he or she is able to master it. Now, one of the other questions we'll talk about is this issue of transferring the grades from the current system, which is sort of a combination of numerical and I just lost it. Scaled. And so now we want to go to, your 1 to 4 system, all right? So the competency grades are going to be on the transcript. So one of the first questions parents have is, oh my God, what are the colleges going to say? They're going to look at that and say, he's got all 3s. Clearly he's not somebody we want. Graeme?
No, 3 for us and for most schools around the state that have already gone to this is competent. That's exactly where you should be aiming for. With the rubrics that each department has designed, there's specific learning targets for that, for 3s and to get to the 4. As part of our research, we reached out to all the New Hampshire colleges, Keene State, Plymouth State, UNH, NHTI, and they are all 100% on board with looking at transcripts that are competency-based. And have told us that they would adapt to our school as long as they understand how our school's competencies are input. It won't affect applications incoming or outgoing. And again, the grade is part of the
Equation.
part of the equation the colleges look at, but the extracurricular activities and the other foundation that makes you a whole make up that. We think that with this new competency-based grading system, the learning targets being more defined, we'll see more students reach that 3 and 4 and kind of remove some of that subjectivity of the teacher.
Yeah, Mike
Mike
Ritter brought up that point, the whole subjectivity issue, and taking that out of the equation as much as possible. I think the other issue is you alluded to the fact that you did a lot of research. So what can you tell folks out there about other schools in the state of New Hampshire that are or are not doing this?
No school's gone backwards. So every school that's gone
Yeah.
over to competency-based grading has stuck with it, has found it a much less burden, per se. For instance, in our math department, we have 6 teachers teaching Algebra 1.
Right.
So in a traditional model, it's subjectivity to me to say, well, they lost 3 points on this problem, 4 points on this problem, this student got an 87.
Right.
Next year they go to geometry, they have a different teacher who grades a different way
Right. Good point.
with a different system, and it's very confusing for the student, and it's not fair to the student.
Right.
Here we sit down, we collaborate, we create the rubrics, everybody understands what a 3 is in an Algebra 1 course. All the students, regardless of teacher, will have those learning targets mapped out.
Right.
So they are set up for success when they go into that next step, in this case would be geometry. And ultimately we're doing a disservice by not making sure that it's happening with this new learning and educational programming.
All right, so that's all well and good, but let's go back to you, Katie. So obviously you've been doing this for a while now, right? And you teach at both the middle school and the high school. The middle school does it too, right?
Sure. Yep.
So the question would be, over the last 3 years, how have your students responded to all this?
I think especially the younger students, the 8th graders and the 7th graders, this is the only way they've known. And so, they are absolutely fine with it. And I think the transition has been a lot more smooth than people think. There definitely is some anxiety about, a 3, I think that's the big issue, is a 3 feels just okay to them, and it's trying to change that language and that mindset that a 3 is not just okay. A 3 means you mastered the skill and you're ready to move on to the next skill. You no longer have to spend time on this. And so I think once we can change the language around that idea of just a 3, I think it's going to be...
So this is also true in your Virgil class? You're getting the same kind of reaction from them too?
They're actually, I just finished grading their midterm papers too, and I gave all the grades back, and we got to have a discussion about it, and they really responded to. I think once you start doing it, it's such a clearer way to give feedback. Gabe said, "How do you tell the difference between a 96 and a 97?"
Yes,
and,
right.
You can tell it's excellent. That's all that matters. It's
Right.
exceeding your expectations.
Yeah, right.
And so I think my advanced students, especially we've been doing it for a couple of years now, they have no problem. The transition is hard, but once you get used to it and rewire the language.
Are you finding that the shift from traditional grading to competency-based grading has slowed your class down? Do you find that you're not able to do the things you were able to do before?
I think it depends on what you mean by that. I think we cover topics now more in depth than we used to. I think that's sort of the real treat about this, is it gives you permission to not try and get to the Civil War by Christmas, or the Punic Wars, or whatever wars.
Yeah.
It gives you a chance to say, oh, the class is struggling with whatever the concept is, and we are allowed to slow down and wait for mastery rather than saying, well, you all did
bad.
okay. And
Right.
that as educators, I think is just really exciting.
Yeah, Graeme, your thoughts on that?
I think when we take the time to slow down, especially in the beginning portion of the year, we make it up at the end because they've mastered the early fundamental concepts.
Good point. Yeah.
I've always found
To
that.
the point of where I'm no longer going back to what we covered in semester 1 or quarter
Right.
1 or whatever the
Review.
arbitrary
Yeah.
timeline is. We've slowed it down, we've mastered it, the classes come along together.
Yeah.
And we can get into the more in-depth, the more tangible things, the transfer of knowledge rather
Right.
than just the procedural knowledge.
Right.
And that's when we get to do the fun projects.
Yeah.
And really get out and see
Yeah.
where is, in my case, the math applicable. Whereas Gabe can go get ready for a concert or the musical and
Right.
select more kids.
I want to go back to your comment about where the math is applicable. Let's turn to Gabe first. Go ahead.
I find in a lot of my classes that I spend more time at the beginning of a course,
Right.
just making sure that the kids know what they're doing.
Right.
And by the end of the course, we're cruising through a lot of different things. Just finished up with a guitar class this week with our final exam.
Right.
And I personally find it frustrating that quarter one grades come and we have to put in a quarter one grade because
Right.
I don't feel like the kids are anywhere close to a 3 or 4 work by the end of the first quarter.
Right.
They're there now, but
Yeah.
it takes almost the first quarter of my semester-long guitar class just to get some basic fundamentals
Right.
down. And
Right.
but once they have that, we can learn all kinds of different songs and different techniques on the guitar.
Yeah,
It's much
see,
easier, but it gives me the time to really work at the foundation.
So what you're getting at speaks to what Graeme was getting at. The whole issue, you have the freedom now to be able to take these concepts and play with them.
Yep.
So you said that, Graeme, or at least you're alluding to that, that now everybody's caught up, if you will. And so you have a chance to say, well, how will we apply that in this situation? How will we apply it in that situation? Let's take some time out and see where we can move these things in different directions, as opposed to, again, being gunned. And I remember this too as a classroom teacher, gunned to be at a certain point by a certain time of the year, or else your department chair is going to have words with you. So, you want to be in this position now where you have a chance, and play is the wrong word, but to experiment with different kinds of applications in whatever it could be. Latin, it could be math, or it could be music. And so you're getting kids that opportunity to kind of seek beyond the boundaries, beyond what the normal expectations might be in a given classroom, and to experiment with those kinds of things and look at new and varied opportunities that perhaps you wouldn't have had time to do in the past.
Exactly.
So you are changing the learning dynamic. You are changing the attitude by which we approach the curriculum. Katie?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I think with both of my colleagues here, that it does save time. And now I'm just thinking about the projects that I get to do at the end of the year that I probably didn't do 8 years ago when I started. And that's exactly it. It's where can I apply this and how can I think about this a little differently?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you guys talked about the issue of the colleges, and I think and help me out. I mean, my sense was that, so I've got Gabe with a bunch of 3s, and I got Katie with a bunch of 4s, so clearly we have a distinction. But you also have the opportunity as the teacher, writing the letter of recommendation,
Exactly. Right.
to be able to distinguish. And so you could say, it's not just the 3 or the 4, it's about the student's motivation to want to take that 3 to the 4. Now maybe in Katie's case, she's able to get the 4 like that, and we have kids like that, and I get that. But what's more interesting is the Gabe case, where he's been getting 3s, but he's coming back to you and saying, what can I do to get to that 4 level? How can I improve upon what I'm doing? So that's something you can speak to in your letter of recommendation. So it's not just a 3 per se, it's a 3 who's really trying to get as high as he possibly can.
Yep. Right.
And that's not to take away from Katie's ability to get the 4 off the bat, but it is to make that distinction so the colleges is able to understand what is unique about Gabe that perhaps may not come out in a traditional grading system.
Exactly.
And that determination, that perseverance. I mean, colleges are looking for, business is looking
Exactly.
for that. It's not about the innate ability that Katie might have. It's more about that perseverance and that dedication and that commitment to the task that's in front of them.
Exactly.
As opposed to, but I didn't get it the first time, so I'm giving up. But those are all important considerations. Actually, I just raised something else that we should talk about. So if you're looking back on your careers, you go pre-competency based to post-competency based, how about this notion of giving up? I mean, can you speak to that, where in the past perhaps you had more issues of kids saying, oh well, too bad, let's move on. Katie?
Oh, I'm just thinking about when the concept of the 0. I know
Yes,
it's hotly
good point.
debated.
Good point, yeah.
But back when there was that ability to put a 0 in a grade book, I mean, a kid could be done
Crushed.
first quarter
Yeah.
or first semester. Well, how many A's do you need to turn a 0 into a 60, even a 60?
Yeah.
And so I think that the great part about this, about competency-based grading system is it takes that punitive point of no return, the zero. It takes it away and turns it into something that can become a conversation and become growth for the student instead of throwing up their hands. And I think I see less throwing up of hands because they know that there's motion, there's mobility.
There's so much research out there, that talks about kids fails that first test that they just pull away from the class, and having the ability to reassess and learn the material that they're asked to learn. There's a lot of kids that will persevere and push forward and learn what they're asked to learn in a class, as opposed to, like you said, just shutting down. They don't do that as much.
Well, sure. I mean, I remember the days when, you didn't turn your homework in as a 0, and you got so many zeros that's going to have an adverse effect on your overall grade. So, I mean, we've all seen those situations, and as a kid, you're thinking, oh my God, I've got this huge uphill battle. Yeah. Or even the teacher who says, well, ordinarily I'd give you a 0, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll give you a 50. So at least it's still failing, and you still did terrible, but at least I didn't give you a 0. Doesn't that make you feel better? And so, I mean, I think your position is it's not about that. It's about, well, the learning obviously didn't take place. So what can we do now to readdress that in such a way that perhaps you can finally come to an understanding of whatever that concept happens to be? But again, when you throw that in a kid's face, 0, 50, or however you try to play it, it's still, quote, the failure. You failed. Right. You aren't able to do it. And so a lot of kids, I mean, all of us too, we were kids too at one point, it's like, oh my God. I mean, you shut down, or you feel like, what am I going to do? And you don't want to be in a position where you're putting the kid behind the 8 ball before he even starts. Right. You want to be in a position of saying, here's where your growth is so far. This is a growth mindset kind of concept. Yep. So how can I get you to continue to grow? What kinds of things can I put in place for you so that you will move from that 1, 2 to the 3, or maybe even a 4? And not everybody has to get 4s. 4s is like well beyond the expectations. 3 is as you said, Katie, that's some of the confusing part here.
Yeah. Right.
The 3 is an outstanding grade. I have demonstrated competency in this area. So as far as the college is concerned, as far as parents are concerned, and as far as the school is concerned, you've done what needs to be done. It's not a C. It's not an average grade. It's a competency. I've demonstrated my ability to do that. The 4 is simply, you've gone well beyond that. It's not what we asked you to do, but you've shown such a propensity for this particular topic. You've been able to shoot, well beyond it. And it's only there to allow for us to distinguish the individual who can take it to the next level. That's really what it's about.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
But your goal is not to have all of us get 4s. Your goal is to have everyone be competent.
Exactly.
Right. To be able to master the skill and move on.
And I think we talk a lot about the high flyers, the kids who are going to succeed regardless of the material, their intrinsic motivation.
Right.
They'll do what they need to do to get to the 4s. Some point, somewhere in time, somebody decided that 60 was passing. And I don't know about the parents out there and what professions they're in, but if they completed 6% of their work, I'm betting they probably wouldn't be at work very long.
Right.
But we take that as that's our minimum acceptable level for you to move on. But that does not create success. It doesn't create motivation. It creates a minimum standard. And
an excellent point.
We're raising the bar now. And we want kids to get to that next level, but we have so much support in place with our flex teachers that go between classrooms, with our labs throughout the school for different subjects, after school 21C program, and the teachers here availability before and after school where we have the support systems in place. The 90 minutes of class time isn't the only time that they're going to get. We're dedicated to these students. We want to see this succeed and reach their goals and their dreams, whether that be college or career.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. I'm sure as a parent, I'd probably say the same thing. It's like, oh, come on now. You're telling me every single kid's going to be able to pass? I mean, the way you guys have engineered this whole thing, surely you're going to have some kids who just can't do it no matter what you do. And I think what you're trying to say is you recognize that if we're going to do true competency-based education, and we want every kid to try as best they can to be competent, that we're going to need to have a whole series of interventions, if you will, and support systems that will allow us to do that. Because in the old days, you would just say, too bad, Katie, you got a D, we're 60, you can move on, we're moving on, but you got the D. And I think now what we're saying is we don't want Katie to be saddled with that. We want to find a way to get her to be competent in that particular unit, skill, or whatever it is she's understudy. And so obviously that's going to take some more time, some more consideration, and as you pointed out, Graeme, some more intervention. So, kudos to the school for being able to put all those things into play. Because I think without it, it would put you in a jeopardy situation.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So let's talk about some other things here. What are you hearing from parents directly right now about the grading system? Because, I obviously hear things too. So, Katie, we'll start with you.
I haven't had parents reach out to me this year about concerns about the and I'm trying to think to when I haven't had parents contact me directly, and I don't know, we've had informational sessions at school, and I wonder if maybe that's when they ask their questions. So I don't know.
Graeme?
Mainly about the fact that we're still in that conversion world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does
that mean?
What is the number? Why is this an 82? Why is it a 10, 12-point gap between each one? And we're looking at the 1 through 4 rubric as how we're scoring as a school, and then when we put it into our software program, it converts over to a 100-point scale. And I think that's where a lot of the
There's a lot of confusion. So
Yeah.
right now, if kids are getting they earn a 3, we have to put
get
a number
it.
into
I
the
get
grade
it.
book.
Software.
And it
There's the
creates,
disconnect.
it creates
Yes.
a confusion
That's
because
the
it's
disconnect.
two different
That's
systems,
it. That's
which could
it.
be another.
So if
another
you
whole
didn't
thing.
have the numerical system, you'd be fine because,
think
okay,
so.
3, I get
think
it, I
so.
get it, that's competent.
Right.
I've done what I need to do. The 82 throws you off. It's like, oh, it's like a B minus. That's not so
Yeah.
good.
Right, it
That's
gives
not
that
so-
B minus.
Right, right, exactly.
stigma's attached right back to
Wow.
it. And
Yeah. Well, I understand this. I know Mike Reardon, our interim principal here, he wants to have more conversations with the community, to have some evening sessions and kind of talk these things through as we've just done. And I think the school wants to be in a position where they're no longer playing double, which is the
Yes.
numerical system plus the competency system. And to say, if we're going to go to competency, let's do it and be done with it and let's move on. But I think those conversations have to occur within the community so folks understand and feel comfortable about it. Right?
yeah,
Agree.
I mean,
Definitely.
parents
Okay.
are the backbone of the community. If they're not on board or understanding what we're doing,
Yeah.
it's going to lead to more confusion and more back and forth. We want the community to be on board,
Yeah.
aware of what's going on, and we
Yeah.
want to get ahead of this before it comes out. So
Exactly.
we're looking forward to these meetings. And
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. It's
Thanks for
great,
having
and I
us.
Thank
hope
you for having us.
appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you folks next week. Thank you.